That is our big message. And also, New North Press is going to share some things to get us started. So we ask that you mute. If you don't, I'll secretly go behind the scenes and mute you. So if that happens, don't be surprised. And then, as you know, a little later on, it's a lot more informal and we can ask questions. If you do have questions you don't feel like asking out loud, you can put them in the chat. We'll help get those asked. But please, once we get to the point where we are opened up, which will be about 20 minutes, half an hour, however long Richard wants to talk, really, then you can unmute and ask those questions. So let's see, we are in London today, which is so exciting. And at the beginning here, we have Richard Ardaugh, and we actually have Graham Bignell, the person who started New North Press, which is really exciting. We're glad you're both here to get us started. I was asking about their wood type fonts, and they have over 500 wood type fonts in their collection, and another 500 probably metal type cases or fonts sitting around as well, which is super exciting. I love your backdrop. It looks like one of those fake Zoom backdrops someone would have.
It's real. It's not fake.
And I think that's really exciting. So I'm gonna pop you guys up. I'm happy to have you guys tell us any more about New North Press, because it's like a little field trip for a lot of us. I haven't been, and I can't wait to learn more.
I'll let Richard take over.
Thank you for being here, Graham.
I'll be around.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Stephanie, and thanks everyone for logging on. I've told Steph already, my main paranoia is that the signal will break up, so if you can't hear me or I start freezing, then wave your hands or do something. So as you know, my name is Richard Ardaugh and I'm in London. I'm at New North Press today, but I'm also a self-employed graphic designer, and I work from another studio when I'm doing that, and sometimes teaching elsewhere as well. But really, to paint a picture and give you some wider context, London is a very big, old, vibrant city. It's very ethnically diverse and rich culturally, but at the same time, it can be quite a competitive and unforgiving place. It's just increasingly not easy to practice anything that requires space because everywhere's so expensive. But luckily for me, having graduated a couple of years later, around 2008, I met Graham. And Graham had established New North Press back in 1986, and already at that time had a pretty extensive collection. I'm not actually going to go too much into the history of the press because Graham's giving a talk tomorrow. The United in Isolation online letterpress festival invited us, and it just so happens that they're back to back, but I'm leading today and Graham's leading tomorrow, and he's going to use that opportunity to give you a bit more of a tour of the building and also explain the history for the 20 odd years before I was even here. Yeah, as I said, he already had an extensive collection at that time, and we began collaborating, making prints together and selling them. And that gradually morphed into a partnership along with Beatrice Bless, who's not here at the moment. She's in Switzerland, where she's from. And the three of us were really able to kind of mobilize and teach regular classes, take on commissions, as well as making our own work. So that is kind of was the three-person, three-topic approach of the press: the teaching, the commissions, and our own work as well. I'm going to just give you a quick rotation to give you a sense of the space we're in. Let me get behind the computer so you can see. We've got kind of a towers of type thing going on where the cabinets are up on top of each other all the way as high as we can go. composing space, furniture. Graham's working on one Albion over here. And then we also have the big Columbian behind me there. And that's about as far as I can go, so I'll come back round. There's plenty more tucked away other places, and it feels like it's constantly moving. There, at the moment, there's a small Albion, a big Albion, and the Columbian, and we're talking about something else that we might be able to fit in, which is going to require quite a lot of moving. But yeah, to give you a sense of what 500 wood type fonts looks like, these are our specimen cards, and we use these when we're teaching to give people a quick introduction into the choice that they have. So we literally just have words set to give them a sense of what something would look like when it is printed, rather than just a standard alphabet. These are really just a quick what's in your head on the page, but obviously if there's lowercase or numerals or figures, they go in there too. Yeah, I'm not going to show you them all, but you get a sense of the way we work. With the teaching, we try and teach monthly classes, which is partly because we value the passing on of knowledge as the key to the survival of the craft, really. And so we want to share that with anyone interested in learning. So these public access classes are once a month, or at least we try to make them once a month. And we get people of all ages, genders, backgrounds, and do a task with them, and then let them get on with their own work in the afternoon. The project we run in the morning, we call the Typographic Masterpiece, and I've pulled out one here. This is number 19, but I think we're up to nearly 50 now. They're always on a subject which the group chooses themselves, and tends to be to do with current events. This one is a famous British pop star who you might be able to guess from the colorway, but essentially their task is to describe the subject without explicitly saying what it is. So it's a kind of elephant in the room thing. All of the lines set are clues to the bigger topic. And the idea is that one person sets a line each. So as a group, they get an amalgamation of that idea. And we really try as best we can to let them drive it. So creatively, it's their project. We offer them advice and explain how to set the type and how to use the press and the inking. But essentially, we see ourselves as facilitators. We're not enforcing a particular doctrine on them. And the great thing is that the posters all look really different. So that's kind of a really nice way of keeping the collection in use. Obviously, you probably all know that you end up having favorites, cases that you always turn to and things that you love using. But the great thing about having people in on a regular basis is that they go straight to something that you didn't even remember having, or that you've only seen used once and you weren't happy with. So it is a way of constantly getting things out and reevaluating the language you can use and the voices. I kind of go off on this tangent usually at the beginning, talking about voices and how you can pick the right tone to express the message. And that seems to be quite a nice way of explaining graphic communication to people. Alongside that, I'm just giving you a really brief overview of what we do before showing you some recent work. But alongside that, we work on commissions. You might recognize this symbol from the Guinness branding. We're invited to redesign that along with a company called Design Bridge and got to, I don't know how well you can really see, there's quite a lot of different print techniques going on there, different layers and blocks, which is really all Graham's expertise. I can't claim any part in that. This is another project which we really enjoyed, the recreation of a poster that John Lennon bought and inspired him to write a song on the Sgt. Pepper album called Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite. There's a great video all about this, so I'm not going to waffle on, but it's really nicely done if you want to know more. Aside from the teaching and the commissions, we obviously run our own work, make our own work and run our own projects, one of which was a 3D printed font, which is behind me actually. Didn't know whether I'd get in trouble with the purists talking to a wood type audience by mentioning 3D printed type, but really we see this as a prototype and something that is just an experiment to see what new technologies can produce. I get asked a lot of questions about the durability of it and about how it compares to wood type. Essentially, we're very happy with the scale of it and the way it performs on the point system. You can lock this up very easily with all your other type, and the type height is great. By nature of wanting it to be contemporary, the design I commissioned, because it was designed by some font designers, doesn't look like anything else you'd find. It's this kind of very fine wireframe design. So it's quite difficult to say whether it's as durable as wood type and how long it will last. But you know, it doesn't read like anything else we've got, and that was kind of the point of the project in some ways. The only durability issues we've had are not in the printing, but actually the cleaning up, because as you wipe this with a rag, the thin walls can snap, which has happened to a couple of the blocks. But I like to think that that would also happen to very thin wood or metal type too. So we'll have to see whether these last as long as the rest of what we've got. But it's in our collection along with all the wood type and everything else, and it's open to use in our workshops. That's kind of the point for me, that it's a tool for open access rather than a niche thing. I've got a printed version here actually. Don't know how well you'll be able to see this. But I've got to do various talks and things about this, which is great. And it kind of, the main thing for me is that it gets people to think about letterpress in a contemporary way. So being able to go to an art college and set a brief for them based on that project kind of feels like it's breathing new life into people's imaginations, which is great. And it's actually that project which made me realize that I didn't know so much about the traditional ways of producing type. And as part of the project, begin to research that and meet more people and become close enough to the people who run the type archive here in London to begin visiting there and understanding how metal type is produced. I've been doing what I've loosely been calling an apprenticeship in monotype punch cutting, which again is a whole big thing to talk about today, probably too big to go into, but I think quite fascinating, the accuracy, dealing with 2/10,000ths of an inch accuracy in cutting a punch on a vertical pantograph machine, which then is stamped into a matrix and then going through the 30 stages to prepare that matrix to go into a die case to go on the caster, and then the type is cast, and only when you print it can you see whether your work is as accurate as it should be. it really joined the dots for me on the history of type founding, which is amazing. And to imagine people doing that with a graver by hand before the pantograph came is mind-blowing. So yeah. So I'm going to talk now about a couple of recent things. In the UK, we're very lucky to have the National Health Service. So one of the main thing you see in people's windows when you're walking around are rainbows, and usually under the rainbow it says, "Thank you, NHS." And the National Health Service are really lifesavers, not mixing any words. Anyone can have free healthcare in this country, which I think we're extremely lucky for. So I wanted to make something as part of that. And I think having limited time in the studio at that point and wanting to make it quick and simple, my brain began to think, and I just literally mixed things up and came up with this. But essentially, what I really like is the way letterpress makes you think of type as physical objects. And it's very easy to mix pieces up and make mistakes. And this is what I kind of think of as a happy accident, in that you can set a type and mix up two letters and give it a completely different message. So I've had this up in my window at home, and you know, it's been hot with the window open, and I can hear people walk past and they stop and they say, "Whoa, they spelled thanks wrong." Oh. And then they walk off with a smile on their face, and I love that. I love that. We also have been having these things on a Thursday evening called the Clap Out, and you come outside of your door at 8 o'clock and you clap and cheer and bang saucepans and things to show appreciation for the NHS. So for me, this was a really great thing to support and be part of. I actually, because I did this fairly on in the lockdown here, realized that I wouldn't be able to print and get people to buy or somehow distribute these. So I ended up making a digital version and giving it a free download link via social media, just to get that immediacy to be able to put it in people's hands for free. They can print their own copy and stick it up in their windows at home. Yeah, it was a slight reaction to wondering whether hand printing something and then posting it to them would somehow spread the virus, which I don't think it would have now, but I didn't know at the time. So anyway, the other thing which we had planned and still are planning, but has suffered a bit time-wise with the restrictions of COVID-19, is an exhibition. 10 years ago, Graham and I held an exhibition which is in the gallery space at the bottom of this building, and it was called Reverting to Type. It was quite a groundbreaking thing that took us by surprise at the time, but it was really popular, and we managed to drag in people from all over the world to be part of it. And it felt like a real celebration and connection of all these people that we could see through, well, I guess it was Flickr at that time, producing contemporary work using letterpress. And we have always talked about the idea of doing another one, but realized that the web of connections was growing exponentially minute on minute. And we finally kind of bit the bullet and committed to having another exhibition this year. I think whereas last time it was a celebration of letterpress and the idea of keeping this craft going, possibly naively, this time we wanted to give it more of a theme and to give it some context and be about the message. So if anyone can remember pre-lockdown and pre-virus, there was quite a lot of things in the world to shout about. Certainly in the UK, we had Brexit, leaving the European Union. obviously we all are seeing signs of the global climate crisis, lots of fake news and surveillance capitalism and fascism, sexism, racism. You know, there felt like there were a lot of things to shout about, and we thought this would be a great opportunity to do that. So the idea of the Reverting to Type 2020 was to make it a protest posters themed exhibition, under the banner that people could produce whatever work they wanted to, but it had to be impactful and fighting their corner on a certain cause. I hope that we still have a relevant theme there, because, you know, the whole world has had to stop and think because of this thing. And what better time to make sure the way we start again and rebuild things is for the better. So when people are making work, incidentally, the deadline for work was originally today, because the exhibition was going to be in July. We've now moved that to November, middle of November into middle of December, just before Christmas. And we're hoping that that gives people more time to produce work, and that people can also adjust and figure out what they think is relevant to talk about now. So we're really hoping to make it as wide and open an invitation as we possibly can. I've certainly been contacting people from as far and wide as I can possibly reach. I'm rounding off what I'm talking about now, but the last thing I was going to mention is that alongside inviting people's work to be in this exhibition, we're also initiating collaborations with people. We've done quite a few workshops where we've taught groups from schools. We've also worked with Crisis, which is a homeless charity in the UK. And I was just beginning a collaboration with a mental health charity. So as part of Reverting to Type 2020, what we're talking about is having diverse voices on the wall. So it's not only privileged, middle class, whatever. There's a great group who I have a friend who teaches at, and it's adults with learning disabilities. And I went to do a workshop with them, and they created such amazing works and such immediate reactions. So I've set some posters that I'm printing to make them part of the show. We're also doing more workshops with this group from the homeless charity and local schools and other people. So it should be a really interesting show. Graham plans to show you the exhibition space downstairs tomorrow as part of the United in Isolation talk. It's not a huge exhibition space, just like our studio isn't huge, but our idea is that it should be quite a visual avalanche of stuff. We're going to fill the walls, and there's a big atrium. We've got some of the big celebrity names of letterpress interested and involved, and it feels like a very universal open collaboration at the moment. So we're really hoping that the world is in a slightly more stable place by then, and that it's another opportunity to galvanize everyone. Yeah, I think I've come to the end of what I was going to talk about. I hope I haven't rambled too much, and I'm open for questions. Graham is here too, so he can. I'm all right, actually. Thanks.
You didn't ramble at all. That was really, really wonderful, Richard. You've gotten all sorts of conversations happening in the chat, which is great.
Yeah, I didn't keep up with any of that. Sorry.
Nope. We'll make sure we can send it to you later. So don't worry about that.
Richard, hi, Graham. Richard, will you talk about your untruth pieces and your other form? I can't remember what it's called. Curses, and then you have.
Yeah. Another project I've been doing is called Form. It's a kind of pamphlet or maybe broadside, which is themed. I was interested in doing something a bit more editorial, and realized that I could be someone who commissioned writing. You know, I'm not a writer, and what I struggle with in letterpress is that you need content. So my thinking was that I could pose a question to a scientist and get them to give me an essay in reply, which I would set and make. So this first issue was on lying, basically. It's called Untruth, but essentially I asked a scientist to explain to me what happens in the brain when you read something that you know is a lie, and talk about why you want to carry on reading it. So basically riffing on the theme of fake news, but this is the piece unfolded somewhere between a broadside and a magazine, I suppose. So this is the text here, and on this hand side you have, I suppose, examples on different scales of things which aren't true. So this is an example that was printed on the front page of a UK newspaper. Freddie Starr is a kind of minor celebrity. Was, yeah. Freddie Starr ate my hamster. The sort of justification was that about 20 years later, the person who green lighted this headline had to stand up in a court of law and admit that it was completely made up. Here, these are kind of clickbait from the internet. I don't know if you can see it. It sort of says 14 beautiful pictures of animals with Down syndrome. No Garys left in Britain by 2050. Woman arrested for defecating on her boss's desk after winning the lottery. You know, urban myths, you're never more than 6 feet away from a rat. And this one at the bottom is a fortune cookie. So different ideas on different scales. And then there's a second issue, which is all about swearing. So in a similar way, what makes us swear? Can swearing be beneficial? If you hold your hand in a glass of water, apparently swearing can make you hold it in the glass of water for twice as long. And we're going to do this without ripping it. So this was the second issue, Curses. And slightly different format for this one. Spread it out. So essay is a block in the middle, and then around the edges are these examples of swearing in different languages. It's quite fascinating looking at the origins of some of these things. Yeah, I hope I'm in an audience where I'm not going to offend anyone, but this one at the bottom is Dutch, and it actually means cancer sufferer. So in Holland, you can insult someone by claiming that they have a deadly disease, which is quite odd. Some of them are about animals, some of them are about religion, some of them are about mothers. Yeah, so it's just fascinating kind of being able to delve into the ideas surrounding some of these things. The third issue is kind of in its initial stages. It takes quite a long time to pull these things together, but I like the idea of it being an ongoing series.
That's cool. And I don't think you offended anyone. It's a pretty...
Casey asked if it was handset or polymer.
No polymer. It was the essay is monotype hot metal cast, but the titles and everything around it is all wood and metal type, founders type that we have here.
Along that idea of slang, Tom wants to know, are there any good British terms for items in a type shop? that we in the US should know, like when we visit? Like, are there any good slang terms for things that maybe we wouldn't call those tools, or anything else you guys use?
Well, there's a lot of traditions and terminology that comes from letterpress printing, but I don't know which ones of them you wouldn't know, if you know what I mean.
Ooh, let's throw them around.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of the kind of Fleet Street tradition, which is to say the history of newspaper printing, so letterpress as an industry, your chapel, it means your place of work, like your printing press that you work for is your chapel. When you graduate from an apprentice to be a fully qualified printer, you have your banging out festival, where you have to set a whole page of type and lock it tight in a form and hold it over your head to prove that you are good at what you're doing, all small metal type. And then people throw flour and eggs at you and tar you and kick you down the stairs and stuff like that. I mean, there's
I didn't do that to Richard when he came.
maybe I'm still an apprentice, who knows?
I was going to say, do you regret not doing it?
Probably. Yeah, I'll have to think about that one.
I think that would be a fun exchange, that we start to note some of those differences. I say I have an intern starting Monday, so maybe by the end of the summer we can have her banging out party.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, how long were apprenticeships? Were 7 years or something?
Yeah,
Weren't they?
huge length of time.
Yeah, but then you started your apprenticeship when you were 14 or something, so it's probably, yeah.
We have some books that explain what the apprentice has to learn, and it's absolutely terrifying the amount of detail they have to go into. It really makes us as printers, well, pretend printers really, in the reality of what it was like to be a trainee typesetter, compositor. So, yeah.
Ooh, that looks good.
Yeah, it's meaty publication.
So here's a question. First one to answer wins a clap. A book is to be reset in 10 point to the same page measures as the original setting in 7 point. If the number of pages in the original was 98, what will the number of the new edition be? Silence.
Someone's thinking.
I'd love to.
Yeah,
I don't actually have the answer, but there must be answers. Yeah. So we're just playing, really.
I see Jim's wheels turning. He's going to have an answer. Him and Tom Walker. I can feel it.
128.
Ooh, we have a 120, a 127, a 128, and a 140. But we don't know the answer, you said, right?
No. So that would have been better if I planned it.
Might
wouldn't
be
it?
at the back.
You guys can all set it and then count from there.
Yeah,
No,
actually,
someone's doing it in InDesign right now.
Nobody wants to set that much 7-point type. I can tell you.
Yeah, this would have to come up at the Type Nerd Olympics.
Richard, I've got a question about the matrix cutting. It seems like there's a lot of interest of it in England. I know Nick Gill up at Effort Press has done some, and it just seems like a lot of you folks are working on this. Some with the Type Archive, and some doing other experiments. Do you have a little quiet group there? I imagine it's hard to meet in the last few months, but have you been working together? Are these all independent efforts? Because it just seems like, I know, I'm blanking. Russell Merritt also, I know, was doing his work at the Type Archive too, but he's American. So is there kind of a concerted effort? Are these all independent?
Well, Nick Gill specifically wanted to start his own type foundry, which he has done. He was based nearer to the Type Archive and was visiting there around the time that I started going, so we overlapped. Yeah, I think his efforts are more, as you said, matrix engraving, whereas what I've been doing is punch cutting. Essentially, the Monotype Corporation has still been running from the Type Archive. So if you want to buy mats for your caster, you can still place orders. And there are some very elderly and extremely knowledgeable people who volunteer there on 2 days a week. They drive for something like a 4-hour round trip, maybe longer, to get there. They're so dedicated. One is in his 90s, the other in his 80s, and several more similar ages. And they were employees of Monotype. So it really is probably spurred on by realizing that these people won't be with us forever and wanting to learn from them. A lot like Norb. It's Norb at Hamilton, right?
Mm-hmm. No, Brusky.
You know, helping them document things, helping them share that knowledge before it's too late, and keeping it as a space and a collection working, because the danger is it could all be packed up and put away and no one would ever know how to get it out and work it again. So to come back to your question, I don't think there necessarily is an organized consortium going on, but people are realizing the same thing and interested in preserving that knowledge.
What's Graham's favorite face in the collection?
Oh my God. It's a pretty tricky question, really. I mean, if I'm printing a book or something like that, then I love using Caslin. I was lucky enough in the early 90s when Stevenson Blake was still open to buy quite a large quantity of all the sizes in Caslin, except 72 point, which I'd still like to find. So I use Caslin, Baskerville, you know. I mean, there are so many different fonts here. It's very difficult to choose one that I want to use all the time. And, you know, every new font that comes into the studio, I get excited about, and then I move on to the next thing, you know. So, yeah, it's very difficult.
What's one project in your shop that you've wanted to get to but haven't gotten to yet, or hope to get to now that you're back in?
Well, I've been in all the time, actually. I the only one in my studio most of the time, so it's been a great opportunity for me, because my other business virtually closed down. So I was able to print. So I've been printing a poetry book for the whole period, which has been great. You know, just working on the hand press or day after day after day. It's a very long project, but it's really coming to the end now, which is great. So when my restoration business starts up again, I'll be able to say I used my COVID sort of hiding away quite usefully, I think. Yeah.
Great, that's awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
What about you, Richard?
I've got books full of ideas of things I'd like to be doing. I think I'm also aware that we have things here which are unique, like the 3D printed font. I was going to mention and didn't actually, we also have this hexagonal woodblock system, which is also here. Don't know if you guys can see that.
Oh, that's delicious.
Beautiful.
Tom Mayo cut that for us. It's laser cut, And I guess the idea is that it's a system. You know, you can tessellate these things to form letter forms and shapes and abstract things or physical things or whatever. And I'd love to do more with that. Printed a couple of big, almost like black letters of compiled shapes that I'd like to do a series of. This is something I did for Letterpress Workers Conference, which was combining the 3D type and this one, but you can see the kind of amazing shapes you can make through tessellating it. Yeah, feels like there's a lot of opportunity to go further with those things.
That's awesome. Thank you.
I was going to also add that, and I might be tripping ourselves up here, but if and when anyone on the call comes to London, you're very welcome to visit us here. We
Absolutely.
really enjoy having visitors and showing our place to people. So, yeah, just get in touch.
I'm
Where
afraid
did you
you'll be
study?
inundated.
You can even come and print here. It's fine.
Wow.
Yeah, I have a feeling you are definitely going to have people take you up on that when it can happen.
Yeah.
Might have to get a ship here.
Yeah, come by boat and spend
Yes.
2 weeks in quarantine and then come and see us.
Be careful, we all might do that.
Letterpress cruise ship. We're all coming.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Well, Steph and I were talking before about how the more people you meet, the closer to the world tour starting you are. You know, join all the dots together.
Yeah, once you meet somebody, you're like, oh, I need to go there, and I need to go there, and I need to go there. So,
Yeah.
Patrick asked where you studied.
I went to Central St Martin's Art College in London, and I started on the fine art course and then did graphics, graduated in graphics eventually. Yeah.
And I trained at a private press in London. So I worked for a private press for 14 years before I set up New North Press and another press in central London. Yeah, it's fun.
someone was also asking if you have any things that new bit of gear that you're looking to acquire. Is it a secret, or can you tell us more about what you were thinking about acquiring?
What was that person's name?
Oh, let's see.
Is that a no then?
No, it's not actually.
It was me.
Richard came in, I think, last Friday, and I've been working on this poetry book, and I'm so used to printing with a hand press, but I was thinking it's got to be quicker. There's got to be a quicker way. And obviously, when we were in Italy, we went to Typoteca for a week. We were using motorized presses. I used to have a Stevenson Blake proof press, but I didn't really know how to get it to work properly, so I was never really happy. But we've thought long and hard about it, and we think now is probably a good time to get a motorized press. It would help Richard with the form projects and also speed up book production, I think. So the press we're looking at, still a bit of a secret. It's a Western proof press. It's 2 meters by 1 meter. So it means we have to move probably, I'm going to show the diagram, probably about 15 or 20 cabinets to get this press in. This was my sketch of where things are going to go. So it means sort of really more floor to ceiling moving, but the trouble is it's all the metal type that has to move. So yeah, Richard's going to get weight training and we've got to move another press out
We-
and then move this other one, which we have to wind up in a lift, which
Yeah.
takes
Wow.
2 hours. Yeah.
I mean, I think we're very lucky. In hindsight, I don't think Graham would have ever known, but this area that we're in East London used to be full of artists, and gradually they've been forced out, and a lot of the design industry, which had been based in Soho and Central London, has moved out to here. So we have a lot of big design companies on our doorstep, and because of that, we are asked to do projects for things which end up usually being digital. So it may be that we're only printing one or a handful of prints for it. And the hand presses allow a lot of precision and control for doing that kind of work. But obviously, if we get emails, as we do quite often, saying, can you do my business cards? I need 5,000 in 3 different colors by tomorrow morning. Well, that's an extreme example, but it just rules out quite a lot of work. And it would be nice to have a wider array of possibilities. So the ongoing conversation seems to have been met with an opportunity, and we'll see what happens. Yeah.
It's always nice to have a plan to go forward, I think, you know.
Yeah, I think one of our very first conversations when I came to visit Graham here, Graham said, this isn't a museum, I want it all to be used. And I thought that's so great, because there's a kind of nostalgic element to letterpress, but then there's also a real treasuring thing to it, to the point where you can see people under the spell of it, to the point that they almost don't want to use it. And Graham has always been someone who embraces change and is happy to adapt and move forward and have a really positive outlook. So yeah, it's great.
There is an element of risk with that, because you get people using a type from 1820 and just picking it up in a clump. So you have to be constantly alert for the newbies about how they handle type. So there is a risk with the typefaces, but I don't know. I think it has to be used, this material. It's been used for, you know, nearly 100 years or 130 years, 140 years. And I'd like it to carry on in that way. So it's important to me that it is, you know, that's why, you know, I wanted Richard in and Beatrice in, and there are other people that come in and help on letterpress in this studio, doing all the tidying. We have interns, all that sort of thing. And I want that sort of sense of awe to be spread to people. To the extent now that I find it's really hard to find new type, which is slightly annoying. But we're happy in a sense that we've got quite a lot of type to be going on with. But yeah, there are pros and cons with it. But the idea that people are using it and printing with it, that's better than the museum, I think.
Yeah, I think access to the tools is one of the biggest things that stop people being able to take their interest further. So it's a bit of a mission statement for us to enable that access.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I always love that Hatch says preservation through production, that like by
Yeah,
using the type,
right.
you're giving the type life and you're letting people have a voice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really important.
I've just seen Greg there. Hi, Greg. Greg Walters. Good to see you. We met in Belgium last year at Patrick Goossen's place, which is another epic cathedral of type and equipment.
Okay.
Was there anyone else who wanted to question or abuse us?
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of, you know, based in the UK, how do you find, you know, you showed the Guinness piece of work earlier. How do you find commercial kind of agency activities interacting with letterpress these days?
Do you mean how do we get the work, or how do we?
No. In terms of how often are you approached, and is it celebrated?
People understand it a lot better now than they did a few years ago, and the time it takes and what's involved.
We often find that when they're trying to design a distressed wood type on the computer, they can't get it right. And it's a lot easier to go to a press and get us to do the proofing so that then they can digitize it from that.
Yeah.
So there is definitely a benefit in coming to us, I think, for certain things.
Yeah, there's a kind of conflict in that designers want to be with you and they want to film it for the authenticity, and they'll ask you to ink it badly because it'll make it look more authentic or whatever. And you have to slightly swallow that and get over it sometimes. I think I'm not a hard line printer where it has to be perfect, no impression, perfect inking, all the rest of it. But at the same time, I don't want to be sloppy and disrespectful. So you have to find a line that you're happy walking, really, and just make sure people understand what they're dealing with. Yeah.
And as a follow-up question to that, how do you feel about that work being scanned in and reproduced in the way that it's reproduced photographically, for example?
I think it's a conversation you have to have with them. We don't really say yes to things where it's going to seem like what we'll be doing will be manipulated and abused. I think we've been very lucky, like I said, in our location and the opportunities we've been given. So there's a basis. We've produced work that we're nearly always happy with, and people will come to you based on what they've seen of your work. So that's a lucky situation, I suppose.
Thank you.
There was one last question, and then I think we'll wrap up just to respect everybody's time. I know letterpress printers, and they could hang around all day. I will say, if anybody wants to hang around, I'm going to take my computer into the staff press room. Jim is printing a tiger from the Globe collection, and why not show you if you want to hang out. But the last question was for you guys, do you have or use any non-type cut in the collection aside from like the hex pieces?
Any non-type?
I think they mean image blocks and those types of things.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we do. There's a lot of stop blocks and things that have come with the type that's been bought. And we do, Graham does amazing liner cuts and wood cuts as well. I suppose it tends to be stuff from advertising mainly, doesn't it? Yeah.
I've also sort of bought 19th century wood engraving blocks, stuff like that at auction. With a hand press, it's so easy to reproduce them, and we also use line blocks quite a lot, you know, for images.
Yeah, I think our situation is, rather than polymer plates, we've always been able to have magnesium plates made, which, not that I've had a huge experience of polymer, but we're really happy with those magnesium plates and the sharpness of them and the way they print, particularly in a form next to type. So that would be our go-to for a logo or anything that we can't recreate from what we already have.
Nice. So thank you guys. That was wonderful. I really enjoyed getting to see more. I love the stack. I think the towers of type and the stacks of specimen is like my new favorite thing, and that was really stunning. So I do want to say thank you so much. We're so glad that you guys invited us in. So thank you.